Hey, what's going on? I want to talk to you about something. I don't know if you've ever really thought of it this way before. Think about this. People, let's say, we've all been in a church for the most part where somebody's like, I heard from God. God gave me this book to write. God gave me this song. God gave me this sermon. God told me to tell you kind of situation. And I'm not even here to debate that. I'm just here to kind of talk about it. Because people that are under our care or under our leadership or under, us as Christians, that just know us as Christians, you can talk all this good game about all the stuff that God showed you. But later on, if you abuse the person, let's say a pastor spiritually abuses somebody by being, maybe he's, angry with them, or he just abuses them in a way. Not necessarily like sexually abuse, but just like spiritual abuse, harsh with them. Often these people, they begin to see God this way, and they feel like somehow God was involved with this, the abuse part, even though he wasn't. I think this is one of the reasons why it talks about in James, like it says, don't let many of you be teachers, because there'll be a stricter judgment as a result. Because think about it, if you're God's ambassador, you're his spokesman, you're up there saying, I received direct revelation from God to give you this word, this message. But now you're being harsh with somebody and abusive with somebody. Sometimes people blur the lines and they're thinking, that's God doing that to me. And unfortunately, if enough of that goes on, people, they usually turn from God and from Christianity altogether. The other day, I went into this, I'll just kind of make it really vague. I went into this group. It was an online group. And I was asking some people about this specific denomination they had been involved with. And these people were so bitter. You wouldn't believe it. These people were so angry and bitter, and they lashed out at me. And I just asked like one or two questions. They were so bitter. And then I found out this whole group, not only had they come away from this denomination and despised it with everything they are, but this is the part I didn't know. They had totally turned against God. So when I was asking them questions like, do you think this group teaches the true gospel? That enraged them. And they were like, how dare you even say the word gospel in this group? And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was an ex-Christian group. But then I started to think, this is the sad thing. The stories they told me and the things I read about how abused these people had been by leadership. And then I realized they had turned their back on God, thinking like God was kind of responsible for this. And then now, the way they were treating me was almost the way they had been treated themselves. So the abuse became the abuser. That was difficult to comprehend. I remember one time I was following this ministry, and the pastor was like a real bomb thrower. He would just come out there and just say real radical statements and sometimes be kind of harsh. And at the time, I didn't really have a problem with it. I thought it was I'm kind of real black and white minded thinking. So it was refreshing for somebody, instead of the tiptoe around, just come out and say what they mean. It was refreshing to me. I remember he would say things about, he would talk about abortion. There's women that are trying to get abortions, and abortion's murder and stuff like that. And I had one of these tapes. It was an audio tape at the time. And I gave it to a friend of mine who was like an international speaker. And he came back later on and he said, now, Mike, I need to talk to you about this. And I go, what? And he goes, Mike, I would almost never bring up abortion in a service. He goes, especially not yelling it and shouting it and screaming it with negative connotations to it. He said, not because I don't believe abortion is a terrible thing. He goes, because I know when I come out and I speak to an audience of 100, 1,500, 1,000, 3,000, I know that I have no idea. That's what he was telling me. I know that I have no idea what I'm running into in the audience. There may be somebody a wife whose husband forced her to have an abortion. There may be somebody, a wife or a girlfriend whose boyfriend forced her. Maybe their parents forced her to have an abortion. Maybe she was so desperate she didn't know where to turn and she just had an abortion. As a result, he said, if I come in there and be shouting all this stuff, I'm going to turn the audience against me in my message, but I might even turn the audience against God. Did you hear that? He said, if I come shouting angrily about abortion and it's murder, he said, I'm going to turn the audience against me. And there's a possibility I could turn the people in the audience against God. And he said, I never want to be in that position to do something like that. So once again, we have to be careful, even at work, how we treat people, how we speak to people. If you're a pastor, you need to be really careful how you... I remember one time, there was this girl I knew, and she was under kind of a real strict pastor, and she thought that God was telling her to do some specific things. But when she would try to tell that to the pastor, he just came down so hard and was like, well, that's not God. No way that would work out. And I think some things that she thought that were actually God trying to speak to her in some way or another, she dismissed them because the pastor was so harsh towards her and just was like, so she kind of saw him as the voice of God. So when she was hearing God telling her to do specific things, she dismissed it because she had this guy set up as like an idol almost, thinking he was the voice of God. There's a lot of complicated things that go on in these situations. But that's just something to think about. So we are going to be careful about our lifestyle, how we treat people, and so on. Hey, do me a favor, hit the like button and then subscribe. When you like it, it allows more people to see it. All right. You guys have a great day.